right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating, maybe a little intimidating.
Ah.
Love.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to use this book as our guide. Love, a very short introduction
Okay.
by Ronald de Sousa. And, well, the goal here is to sort of try to take this really big topic
Right.
and try to break it down into something we can all
Mhm.
understand, wrap our heads around.
Well, it's certainly a topic that people have, been trying to wrap their heads around
Yeah.
for centuries. Philosophers, poets, scientists, and, even after all that attention,
Yeah,
it still manages to surprise us, I think.
absolutely. It's one of those things where you think you've got it figured out, and then
Yeah.
boom,
Yeah.
something happens that throws you for a loop.
Right. Exactly.
So I guess the first question is, where do we even begin?
Well, De Souza starts with a question that, seems very basic, but
Yeah.
it's actually, when you dig into it, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
What can we love? I mean, we can all say, oh, I love my family, I love my dog, I love my partner.
Right.
But can we love anything? Can we love, a carrot or a place?
I see where you're going with this. So it's like, yeah, I like carrots,
Right.
but I don't love them the same way I love
Exactly.
my family or my dog.
Exactly. So it is the same word, and we use it all the time. But what we're actually talking about and experiencing can be very different.
Right. So are there things that are inherently lovable, though?
That's a good question.
Or is it all completely in the eye of the beholder?
That's a big debate, right? And, sort of De Sousa brings up this really interesting analogy. Baby goslings.
Okay.
So they imprint on the first moving object they see,
Right.
usually their mother. But, they've done experiments where they imprinted on like a human or even like a box on wheels.
A box on wheels.
Yeah.
Wow.
What do you make of that?
Well, if a gosling can fall in love with a box on wheels,
Yeah?
then I
Yeah.
guess, what does that say about our choices?
Right.
I mean, are we really choosing who and what we love?
Yeah, and it makes you think about like how our early experiences, particularly with caregivers,
Yeah.
how that shapes us,
Absolutely.
how that shapes our ability to love at all.
Yeah, so we're not just born with it. It's definitely a
Yeah.
developed thing.
Right. It's developed, but then does that mean we're destined to love certain kinds of people, a certain type?
I guess that's the nature versus nurture thing, right?
Exactly.
Like how much is hardwired
Yeah.
and how much is experience.
Yeah, and I think De Sousa's argument is that it's a little of both,
Yeah.
We're not just blank slates, but we're also not robots.
Right. So let's say you've met someone.
Yeah.
Those sparks are flying. You're starting to feel those feelings.
Right.
Do we love for reasons?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I mean, can we even really articulate why we love someone?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that De Sousa spends a lot of time on, and I think makes a pretty convincing argument that sometimes, maybe not. Maybe our reasons aren't as clear-cut as we think they are. He uses this example of Romeo and Juliet. I mean, what were Romeo's reasons for loving Juliet, really?
I mean, she was beautiful. She had a great personality, I guess. But couldn't those reasons apply to lots of other people, too?
Exactly.
I mean, what happens when those things fade? Which, let's face it, they do over time.
Right. And that's kind of his point. Listing reasons for love can be a little risky
Okay.
because you might not be loved for the reasons that you want to be loved for.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be kind of ego bruising. And also, when you try to really pinpoint those reasons, sometimes you realize, well, wait a minute, maybe these aren't as solid as I thought they were.
So maybe it's all just stories we tell ourselves. I mean,
Sure.
Are we all just fooling ourselves when it comes to love?
Well, I don't know about fooling ourselves, but maybe we're oversimplifying it, De Sousa is suggesting that maybe it's more about this really complex interaction between two individuals,
Yeah.
their histories, their desires, and how they see each other.
Speaking of seeing each other, what about that, looking into each other's eyes?
The gaze.
The gaze.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think where you lock eyes with someone and you feel like the world melts away.
Right, right. That very intense feeling of connection. Yeah, he spends some time on that.
It's powerful.
And he talks about how mutual gaze can create this sense of connection, even a sense of merging with the other person. Have you ever felt that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, yeah, everything else just disappears and it's just you and that other person. But is it real?
That's the question, right?
Or are our brains just, messing with us?
Right. Is it just hormones or is it something more?
I mean, there's definitely some chemistry going on there.
Yeah, there's evidence that certain hormones are released when we lock eyes with someone.
Okay.
And that contributes to feelings of euphoria,
Yeah.
attachment, but does that mean it's love?
Right, right.
That's a whole
That's a whole other question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what about unrequited love?
Oh, yeah.
Can it be true love if it's not reciprocated?
Oh, that's a good one. So, it raises the question of, is reciprocity even essential for love to be real? He brings up this great quote from Goethe that really kind of challenges this idea of love being this two-way street. It's a character in one of his plays, and he says, "And if I love you, what business is that of yours?"
Wow.
Right. So there's this idea that maybe unrequited love is pure
Yeah.
because it doesn't have any expectations.
Yeah. It's not about getting anything back.
It's
It's just pure feeling.
But the counter argument that de Sousa brings up, is, well, if love is about growing and transforming within a relationship, then how can unrequited love really do that? Because it's just a fantasy. It's this longing for something that may or may not ever.
Right. It's not grounded in reality.
Right. Exactly.
So I guess there's no easy answer when it comes to unrequited love. It really depends on how you define it and how you experience it.
Exactly. And it's up to each individual, I think,
Yeah.
to decide what it means for them.
So this brings us to maybe a slightly darker aspect of love,
Okay.
and that's the whole idea of possession
Right.
and this fear of loss that often comes with it.
Yeah,
I can feel this getting a little heavier.
a little heavy. Well, he draws this interesting parallel
Yeah.
between the culmination of desire,
Okay.
like reaching orgasm,
Okay.
and the traditional view of marriage as a form of ownership.
I never thought about it that way, but I can see the connection.
Right.
Yeah.
And he even goes so far as to compare possessiveness in love to the master-slave dynamic.
Okay.
It's a provocative comparison.
It is.
It makes you think, can we really possess another person?
Especially in the context of love, which is supposed to be about,
Right.
Freedom and connection and
Right.
all those good things.
Exactly. And it makes me think about jealousy,
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all tied in,
Yeah,
right?
it's all tied in. Is jealousy a natural part of love, or is it something we should try to overcome? Is it a destructive force?
Yeah.
And de Sousa kind of suggests that while it might be an innate human emotion, it's often not very helpful. In relationships, it often leads to behaviors that damage
Right.
the very connection we're trying to protect.
Well, we've all seen how jealousy can make people act in ways they normally wouldn't,
Yeah.
with disastrous results.
Absolutely. And then, what's really interesting too is that cultural norms around jealousy vary so widely.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
some cultures encourage it and others discourage it.
Exactly.
So even something as primal as jealousy is influenced by the society we live in.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about how much of our entire experience of love,
Right.
from who we're attracted to how we express it,
Right.
is shaped by the norms and expectations of our culture.
That's a great point. And, it's something we'll continue to explore as we go through this book. And de Sousa sort of touches on this through the concepts of Puritan versus pansexual models of love that are described in Plato's Symposium.
Oh, okay. So now we're getting into Plato.
Well, a little bit.
All right. I
Yeah.
love it. I'm ready for some philosophy.
Well, in this context, the Puritan model, really emphasizes reason and control
Okay.
over emotions and desire, whereas the pansexual model sees love as encompassing all of those things, the physical, emotional, intellectual.
So two very different ways of looking at it.
Two very different ways.
And it sounds like de Sousa doesn't even stop there. He goes into neuroscience,
That's right.
trying to understand the biology of love.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. I want the whole picture.
Yeah.
Philosophy, science, everything.
I agree.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about so far.
Yeah.
But we're just getting started.
I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
I can't wait to see what other insights this book has in store for us.
Me too.
All right, so we're back and we're still kind of swimming in this sea of love.
Right.
But we've talked about what we can love and why we love. But I think what we really need to talk about now is desire.
Desire.
Because isn't that really kind of the engine that drives it all?
Yeah. It's a powerful force.
It is, but it can be kind of a double-edged sword, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it can be exhilarating, motivating,
Yeah.
but it can also be agonizing, debilitating.
Because if you never get what you desire, then you're just left wanting.
Right.
But even when you do get what you want,
Right.
sometimes It's not all it's cracked up to be.
Exactly. There's that feeling of, is this all there is?
Yes, exactly. The letdown.
The letdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, de Sousa even, he quotes Shakespeare's Sonnet 129, which basically calls desire. Okay.
Perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame.
Wow.
Makes you wonder, right? Like, are we setting ourselves up?
Yeah, maybe Shakespeare was being a little dramatic.
A little dramatic, maybe.
Yeah.
But it is that powerful force,
It is.
And I think we've all felt that intensity.
Right. I mean, not all desire is like murderous and bloody.
No.
I mean, sometimes it can be just pleasurable.
Right.
Like the anticipation of something good.
Yeah, the anticipation.
Like, oh, I'm looking forward to that vacation.
Right.
Or, I can't wait for that first cup of coffee in the morning.
Absolutely.
But even those pleasurable desires, eventually they fade once they're fulfilled, right?
Yeah, and, de Sousa talks about how the very act of achieving what we desire can actually lead to its extinction.
So it's like a self-defeating cycle.
Yeah. We strive for something.
Yeah.
We get it.
And then it's gone.
It's gone, at least for a while, and then the cycle starts again.
Right. So how does this play out in love?
In love, yeah. I mean, if those really intense feelings, eventually they fade.
Right.
How can love last over the long haul?
That's the million-dollar question. Well, he kind of delves into, the neuroscience of desire, looks at, the reward systems in the brain. So every time we experience something pleasurable,
Okay.
whether it's a great meal, a loving embrace,
Yeah.
certain areas of the brain light up. They release dopamine, these feel-good chemicals.
So we're hardwired to want more of that.
We are hardwired. Yeah.
We want more of that.
But how do we translate that into lasting love?
Right. Well, that's where the idea of reinforcement comes in.
Okay.
So each time those pleasure centers are activated, it strengthens
Yeah.
those neural pathways.
So it's like building a muscle, basically.
It is. Yeah. You use it, it gets stronger. But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
He introduces this concept of reason-free desires.
Reason-free.
Yeah. These are desires that we don't choose and we can't really change.
So you're saying there are some things we just want? Just want.
Yeah, even if we don't know why.
Even if we don't know why.
So it's not about logic. It's not about willpower. It's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is, And I think those desires, particularly the ones related to love, they can feel as real as our own existence.
Wow. So I guess that raises the question of how much free will do we really have?
That's a big question.
When it comes to love.
Yeah. And, I think even if we acknowledge those reason-free desires, we still have the capacity to make choices.
Right. We can choose how we act, how we respond to those feelings.
Exactly.
So maybe we can't control that initial spark, but we can choose what we do with it.
Yeah, exactly. We can choose whether we fan the flames or let them die out.
Okay, that makes sense. But didn't we say earlier that, sometimes we love for reasons?
Yeah.
So how do those two ideas fit together?
Well, it's a paradox, right? And de Sousa kind of argues that even though those desires might be coming from our subconscious, we as humans, we try to rationalize them.
Right. We want to make sense of
So we want to make sense of them.
So we come up with reasons, even if they're not really the true reasons.
Right. They're stories we tell ourselves.
So I might say, I love him because he's so intelligent.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just a convenient explanation for something much deeper and more complicated.
Right. It's like trying to explain why you find a piece of music beautiful. You might talk about the melody or the rhythm.
Yeah.
But it's often just something you feel.
Right. You just feel it.
You feel it.
And if you try to overanalyze it, it kind of loses its magic.
Exactly.
So, if our reasons for loving someone aren't always clear, how do we know if they're even good reasons?
Good reasons. That's a great question.
I mean, how do we judge that?
Well, de Sousa actually talks about, just like there can be good and bad reasons for making a decision, there can be good and bad reasons for love.
Okay. So
Well,
what makes a reason good or bad?
Well, he argues that, good reasons should be focused on the inherent qualities of the person themselves,
Okay.
not external factors like wealth or status.
So it's about loving someone for who they are, not what they have.
Exactly. Their character, their spirit, even their flaws.
Right, but who gets to decide which qualities are good? I mean, isn't that kind of subjective?
That's a great point.
Hmm?
And he introduces this concept of focal properties.
Focal properties.
Yeah, those are those specific qualities that draw us to another person. But what we focus on, what we deem important, it can vary so much from person to person.
Right. So what I find attractive, you might find totally boring,
Right.
and vice versa.
Exactly. And both could be valid reasons. He actually uses a couple of really interesting examples. One is Alcmene from Greek mythology. She was so devoted to her husband that even Zeus, disguised as her husband.
Wait, Zeus, like the god Zeus?
The god Zeus.
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Right. Even he couldn't seduce her because she was drawn to that authentic historical connection that she had with her actual husband.
So it wasn't just about physical appearance or behavior.
No, it was something deeper.
Yeah, it was the shared history, the bond that they had built together.
Exactly. And then he also brings up Roxane from Cyrano de Bergerac.
Okay, yeah.
She falls in love with Christian for his looks and his bravery, but she thinks that he's the one writing her these beautiful love letters.
But of course, it's Cyrano who's writing the letters.
Right.
Classic case of mistaken identity.
Mistaken identity.
So who did she really love?
Right. And that's what de Sousa is trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And he argues that she actually loved Christian, even though he wasn't the one with the qualities that she found most appealing.
So we can be mistaken about the reasons we love someone.
It seems so.
And even about who we truly love.
Yeah. Love is complicated. And then to make things even more complicated,
Oh, no.
he brings in Freud.
Of course he does. Gotta love Freud.
Gotta love Freud. Yeah, specifically the concept of transference.
Okay, remind me what that is again.
So Freud believed that sometimes our feelings of love are actually displacements
Okay.
of earlier attachments, particularly those we formed with our parents.
So you're saying we might be subconsciously attracted to people
Yeah.
who remind us of our parents.
It's a little unsettling, but, Freud.
Yeah. It does make you wonder how much of our choices are really our own.
It does. It adds another layer, right, to this whole puzzle.
So we've got biology, we've got upbringing, we've got past relationships.
Right.
And then de Sousa mentions that there are these political anxieties about the appropriate focus of love. What does that even mean?
So he's basically saying, we talk about love being blind, but there's also this expectation that true love should see the whole person. But is that even possible?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have our biases, right?
Right.
And we're drawn to certain things.
Absolutely.
We might overlook others.
Yeah, so it raises the question of whose perspective matters most, right?
Yeah.
Is it the lover's perspective?
Or the beloved's.
The beloved's perspective. Or is there some objective truth out there?
That's a tough one. And how does this connect to the political side of things?
Well, if we can't even agree on what someone's true self is, then how can we decide what's an acceptable form of love? And should society even have a say in who we can and cannot love?
We're getting into some really deep waters here.
Deep waters, yeah. And these are questions that societies have been grappling with for a long time.
Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on for now.
I agree.
We'll be back soon to talk about the science of love and the possibilities for a utopia built on love.
Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into love using Ronald de Sousa's Love, a very short introduction. We've gone through the philosophy and the psychology, and now I'm kind of ready to geek out on the science a little bit.
All right. Sounds good.
I'm especially curious about those love typologies that we touched on earlier.
Right.
Like, can we really put love into category? I mean, it seems so messy and fluid.
Well, de Sousa, he presents a couple of different models, frameworks, I guess you could say, for understanding different aspects of love. So, we talked about John Allen Lee's 6 Colors of Love.
Right.
He also goes into Robert Sternberg's triangular theory, which breaks love down into these 3 components, intimacy, passion, and commitment.
Right, and we were talking about how those different components can combine to create all these different kinds of love.
Exactly.
Like some of them sounded surprisingly familiar, like fatuous love, high on passion and commitment, low on intimacy.
That sounds like a whirlwind romance,
Yeah, burns bright but maybe doesn't last.
Right.
And then there's romantic love.
Right.
Passion, intimacy, but no commitment. Maybe that's like the honeymoon phase.
Maybe, yeah.
Before things get real.
Yeah, before things get real.
So are there, like, tests? I mean, how do we know which category we fall into? Do we have to, like, consult the stars or something?
Well, I don't think de Sousa offers any definitive answers.
Right.
He's really emphasizing that these are just ways of understanding the dynamics of love. It's not about labeling ourselves.
So it's not like a personality test.
No.
It's more about using these as tools to think about our own experiences.
Yeah, tools for reflection.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, speaking of getting a deeper understanding,
Right.
let's talk about the brain for a minute.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, we talked about those brain scans showing similar regions lighting up for romantic love,
Right.
maternal love.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, it's fascinating, right?
It is.
I mean, it suggests this biological basis for love, this all-consuming feeling, whether it's for a partner
Yeah.
or child.
So maybe it's not so much about choice as it is about our brains just being wired
Yeah.
for connection.
Wired for connection. It's a compelling thought.
It is.
And de Sousa, he really delves into the nature versus nurture debate.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about those MHC genes
Right.
and how, women might be subconsciously attracted to men
Yeah.
with different immune system profiles.
Right. So that's like a biological drive
Yeah.
to have healthy
Yeah,
offspring.
exactly.
But then we also talked about those Polynesian societies
Yeah.
where jealousy is like actively discouraged.
yeah.
So that suggests that culture
Culture can override biology.
can actually override those deep-seated
Yeah.
biological impulses.
It's complicated.
It is complicated, which is pretty much the theme of this whole book, I think.
I think so too. Yeah.
So we've reached the final chapter,
Okay.
and de Sousa is talking about creating a utopia for love.
A utopia for love.
Now that sounds intriguing. So, does he have all the answers? Is there a secret formula for a world without heartbreak?
Not quite. Actually, he's pretty cautious about a world where we could perfectly engineer our desires
Okay.
through technology.
So no magic love potion.
No magic love potion.
No perfect matchmaking algorithms.
I don't think so. He suggests that, if we had complete control over love, it might actually backfire.
How so?
Well, we might lose that spontaneity,
Yeah.
the mystery, the individuality.
The things that make love so exciting.
Exactly. So if love becomes predictable and perfectly controlled, is it even love anymore?
Right. Where's the passion?
Right.
Where's the risks?
Exactly.
Where's the fun?
Yeah.
So what does he propose instead?
Well, he seems to think that a utopia for love wouldn't be about eliminating all the challenges
Okay.
or erasing the complexities. It would be more about creating a society that's more accepting
Okay.
different ways of experiencing love.
So more freedom to choose, more understanding.
Just
less judgment.
Less judgment. Yeah. And he points to some alternative models like party paternity,
Okay.
which is practiced in some Amazonian tribes.
What is that?
So basically, a woman has multiple partners,
Okay.
and they're all considered fathers to her children.
No.
So it really challenges our very traditional ideas of monogamy and possession.
It's a different way of thinking about family and
Yeah,
relationships.
exactly.
So I guess the takeaway here is that there's no one right way to do love.
Yeah, I think so. I think, even though a perfect world for love
Yeah.
might not be achievable,
Right.
I think understanding all these different factors, our biology and our culture, our experiences,
Yeah.
it can help us navigate the complexities
Yeah.
with more awareness, more compassion.
So we've talked about a lot of really big ideas.
We have.
Is there one thing that we could take away from all of this? I mean, if there are no easy answers, no guarantees,
Right.
where does that
No.
leave us?
Well, I think de Sousa's book is encouraging us to approach love as a journey,
Okay.
a journey of self-discovery. It's a dance between our instincts and our culture
Yeah.
and all those unique experiences
Yeah.
that shape us.
So it's about accepting the messiness,
Yeah.
the uncertainty, the heartbreak, even as part of the deal.
Part of the deal. Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into love.
I think so too.
We've covered a lot of ground. We've laughed, we've cried, we've questioned everything we thought we knew.
That's right.
But hopefully we've all come out of this with a little more understanding, a little more compassion,
Yeah.
and maybe even a little more love for ourselves and each other.
I hope so.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.